Okay, so this is my screen. I'm shifting platforms lately. I used to work with e-ink tablet called the Remarkable, and I am moving over to an iPad because my old tablet broke down. My Remarkable tablet broke down. So I'm more or less working on like new apps. And these apps for me are quite important because, you know, whenever I open up a topic, it's very easy to get lost. So to be able to open up, let's say today would be the orange, to be able to open up all these topics that tend to come up in the calls, the innerdance talks, be quite interesting to share these apps, I guess, to find like a cross-platform situation where ideas that are being generated would be shareable. So I'm working on Obsidian so that like a lot of the ideas that I have that's more text-based could go here. And this could be shareable as well within like what's called vaults. But it'd be interesting to start sharing these platforms for trainers out there who are working on like their particular maps, especially where let's say like source material would be concerned. You know, like I haven't really uploaded a lot of my source material here as things were a lot more clear in my old systems. I still need to upload my source texts that I normally bring up when in the study of inner dance. Like there are some consistent ones. So yeah, I just wanted to share at least my workflow so that more or less you know where like I'm constructing from dimensionally. So yeah, wait. Yeah, so I hope you're well. We're well on our way through the third wave, and I'm pretty sure there's so much happening like in your space that's making sense and yet also not making sense. I tend to turn to orange because of its simplicity. The orange dimension is the spiritual dimension. And it could be a very, very fun color to traverse. So let me open up the wiki section of the website. Firstly, like the philosophy to embody orange would be phenomenology. And I want to go into phenomenology today as to why is phenomenology in the orange. Birthing would be the key value system. And the principle is regression is progression, I feel. It's like to go back is to go forward. Somehow when we become like a child, we also become like the wise old person, like the old man or the old woman in the mountain, at the mountaintop. It's also speaking to the baby, like in the orange. So in the orange, we bring up terms like going back to the source, going to the core of things, the essence of things, of which phenomenology really is about. In terms of the neurological, like epilepsy and aphasia normally gets brought up when we hold discussions with doctors, psychologists and whatnot. Because the structures are there. When we bring up aphasia, that happens in inner dance, either Broca's aphasia or Wernicke's aphasia, like either in light language or the inability to put things into words after one has gone into the journey, or even the inability to understand spoken or written language as it's being produced by others. There's a lot of structure there that comes up um, in the process that could be studied, that could be looked at. So I don't want to go too much into just you can just browse through the website. I think this needs a lot more improvement. We haven't put enough time into this, but just to more or less introduce keywords is more than enough for us to help to hold the orange deeply. Okay, so let me take the iPad, bring it to my lap. I'm checking if I am sharing the screen. I am sharing the screen. So let's start with notes. I think before even taking up phenomenology, the thing in orange that we hold dear that doesn't always come clear is what is the role of experience? What is experience at all? And phenomenology is the study of experience in the psychological and philosophical sciences. That very often, like in traditional, rational, teleological Western philosophy, experience isn't always held as what contributes to epistemology, the theory of knowledge, especially when it comes to the subjective experience. You know, for many psychologists, there is some level of confusion as to even how an experience is defined. What does it really mean to experience something? And I think from the space of inner dance, when we start to study aspects of the mind, consciousness, then when we put knowledge and experience face to face with each other, like one question we could ask, even within the realm of science, is it actually possible to know something that we haven't experienced? Yet, is it possible to experience something without knowing about that thing that we are experiencing? So there might be different degrees or levels of experience. One, let's say, basic thought experiment is to travel to another country where you don't know the language, you don't know the culture, you don't have the a priori knowledge that culture holds. So let's say you didn't have that, and then you go to that foreign country and people are speaking these foreign words and you have no idea what is being said. Are you able to experience that culture, right? So slowly you start to take in through immersion what the words might mean, and the experience starts to jump out more and more. In the inner dance process, that's not typically the kind of experience that we study. Like we're experiencing like energy states prior to knowledge. Let's say the proto manifestations of the a priori knowledge system. Without knowing anything about something, is it possible to experience something in its totality, its absolute, its purity? That's more or less the ideal that facilitators sort of try to hold. So we need to account for different types of experiences and different dimensionalities of knowledge. And phenomenology is a beautiful long-term construct to hold when we start to ask questions like these, like, is it actually possible to experience something without understanding it, without knowing about it? And is it possible to know about it without experiencing it? So phenomenology is exactly the system that studies that. It came up because of the need to account for what is the nature of experience in terms of like truth, right? Um, does your personal experience in your deep process contribute to truth? And how does that correspond with global truth? Now, I think we can go deeper into this in the yellow, especially when we think about synesthesia as a concept and sense perception, like, you know, what you're feeling, what you're hearing, what you're seeing in the world, as opposed to what you're thinking and what you're imagining. Is there a difference between the mental experience and the physical experience? And I guess the debate goes on because much of science has relied on the physical experience, the concrete experience, rather than the abstract and the imaginary, like the virtual experiences that a lot of people are having in what's called the imagination. So one particular debate has to do with the question, do all experiences have conceptual content? Because there are schools of thought that believe that there are experiences that do not have conceptual content, that you know, when you experience the world, it's really just a chaos of pure sensory elements. And then there's something in your brain, your mind, that would create a gestalt, you know, like a whole system's image or concept. In that sense, that you're making things up, and yet that thing that you're making up, like in the world, it looks nothing like what it would look like to you, like to another person from a different language system or a different cultural context. Like things would look quite different. So phenomenology goes deeper into the realm of science today, because of questions like these, you know, like and I feel in the innerdance facilitation mode, you would need some level of theory as to how, like, what do you see, what do you believe in? And as per usual, it's probably going to be both, that there are experiences that do not have conceptual content, and then there are experiences that do have conceptual content. And there's a concept that I'd like to bring up within phenomenology called intentionality. Okay, intentionality is an important concept. And for those who have listened to the ASH dialogue, maybe we can listen to that a little bit today. The word intention comes up in this really deep inner dance dialogue that I had with a woman from Malaysia many, many years ago, where she went so deep. Then we were able to document the depths that she had gone to, what she might describe as the universe that was in the mind. So intentionality is I would say, the aboutness, the properties of objects that makes them what they are, distinct from other objects. And going into that debate that I mentioned, like intentionality in phenomenology asks, do they exist in mental objects only? Okay. Are they properties in our minds that when we start to experience the world, we start to account for these experiences with the objects that are contained within the concept, that irrespective of you, do they exist in and of themselves a priori, you know, like, or do physical objects themselves also hold intentionality, you know, like the objects in the world, like the tree, like the chair? Is there an intentionality, like an aboutness? Intentionality is a little bit also like directionality. Like, is there a tendency in that object to be sat on or to be eaten or to be embraced? And when we do interact with any object out there, there is some kind of intentionality there that meets an intentionality that is within you. And so when the body begins to move as it does, there is a kind of intentionality that does its own thing. When the body moves on its own, there is some kind of intentionality that was pre-written, that was there before any interaction, before any setting of an intention. There is a difference between an intentionality and an intention. So this is like one of the reasons phenomenology becomes very interesting in the inner dance process. Now, I really loved it. At one point, there was this lady from Australia who was trying to describe inner dance to a colleague. They were having a conversation. They're both academics, and her name's Rebecca. Rebecca was trying to describe inner dance. She was writing her MA thesis, and like inner dance was a chapter in it. And she described inner dance as a phenomenology. She said it's a phenomenology, and the professor, who was her advisor, he was one of the more senior ones in this big university in Melbourne. He's like, okay, so it's a phenomenology. I get it. I know what it is. So when people say things like those, what does it exactly mean, right? Now, phenomenology is a philosophy, it's a psychology, but it's also more or less a method. It is a methodology, beginning with the work of Edmund Husserl, who is a Swiss psychologist and philosopher and phenomenologist. Edmund Husserl. I agree with some of his ideas. I don't agree with all of his ideas, but he started the more formal track into what is now called phenomenology. Without him, then there wouldn't have been a formalization of phenomenology in that sense. So there is a long Husserlian tradition that provided the backdrop for what we understand now as this term, phenomenology. Now, one of his methods that really appealed to inner dance is called bracketing, which could also be called like phenomenological reduction. I think there are other names for it. Bracketing, for me, is definitely like an inner dance, because bracketing, as defined, is the suspension of prior judgments and biases about the thing, what thing, let's say the thing being looked at. All right. So I would say that's where the word phenomenon comes from. So that when, let's say, you're looking at something or someone, could be you're looking at your mom, is it possible to see your mom without any prior judgments, however basic or deep, like the momness of your mom, that makes her your mom and makes her a mom? Are you able to see your mom without any bias or without any judgments? Are you able to see your partner or your dog or your things without, putting on the skin that surrounds the onion? And this sounds like inner dance, as it has been described in, say, newspaper articles, magazine articles, documentaries people tried to make. They would call inner dance a way of peeling away the illusions and the judgments, even the emotions that hide the core essence of the human. So in that way, we are bracketing. Like inner dance is a bracketing process. It is then a phenomenology. It's another word that came out of Edmund Husserl was epoche. We're conducting an epoche. It's the method. There is a method, and some of these ideas regarding phenomenology were thought about maybe a little over 100 years ago. But right now, with what we know about neurological, especially, that there are certain ways of handling bodies and nervous systems that help people to let go. Because when you do bracketing, what exactly are you talking about? You know, what are different ways we are bracketing within inner dance? You know, like we've been studying certain brain regions to do with memory, which is the hippocampus, let's say emotions, which is the amygdala and the limbic system at large, addiction, desires, the nucleus accumbens, let's say addiction, desires, behavior, that somehow there is a way of approaching the autonomic nervous system through simultaneous co-activation that allows people to transcend certain aspects of memory, certain aspects of emotions, and certain aspects of what people are attached to. So in that sense, definitely, I would say bracketing happens in inner dance, has always happened in inner dance. But you know, what may not be so obvious is like underneath all of these phenomenon, these sensorial and mental content that we accredit or apply to the things that we're looking at, what is the core, right? So, okay, those are beautiful ideas, but what does it mean to get to the essence that is not simply the thing that I'm looking at, you know? So trainers, facilitators always need to develop this gift that like everything that you see is not ever what you're seeing. There's always something more. It's never the literal thing. It is never it's never the literal thing. It's never it's never the object. There's always like the something deeper anyhow. So that's more or less the basics of why phenomenology becomes a long range philosophical ground. Now, let's go straight to inner dance. Like there's something that happens to the mind and the brain that is very, very particular to the deep experience, like the black hole experience. A word that I would bring up today to describe that is the loop. There are these movies and even documentaries describes what a trip to the black hole would look like. And the black hole can have different ways of being seen. Like in inner dance, I would rather spell it as that. And I believe when we go to the black hole, then there's a different experience of space and time that is very similar to, how do I say this? I feel that the universe is not outside of us. I feel it's inside. That's a paradigm that happens in the spiritual scientific evolution that finds a meeting point. In cosmology, quantum physics, and spiritual awakenings, we are becoming more and more aware of the holographic nature of the universe. So I feel the black hole is also inside. And every time you go to sleep, I feel especially in the non-REM 3 stage, slow wave sleep, the more delta you're experiencing, you go into the black hole. Psychedelic journeys can go into the black hole, but most especially when we have the death experience, particularly the transition from death, from life to death, as well as birth to life. Like the two names we can give that is the life review. And, you know, like the thing that people experience at the point of death. I saw my whole life flash before my very eyes. The birth vision would be the opposite. I'd like to speak about this more so in the following call, not today. The birth vision would be the life review opposite. It would be like, I saw my whole life flash before my very eyes before I came here. And it's those who died long enough who told that experience that they saw where they were about to enter, like another incarnation, another life. But they got held back and they returned to to the old, the system, the existing system, and then they say, oh, okay, that's actually what it looks like. I've had numerous life review experiences. I've had numerous birth vision experiences as well. So I, for one, believe in these. And I don't see a difference. Like, I feel the life review is the birth vision. If time is relative, it doesn't exist in a linear construct, meaning time is a cycle, then when we go into the black hole, every time you go into the black hole, and this can happen before you die, I mean, upon dying and before you're born, this could also happen every time you're dreaming. Like, for me, every time I blink, even when I close my eyes momentarily, I'm in the black hole. My eyes are open again. I don't see a separation. I feel it's always there. And depending on how you hold yourself within dialogue and everyday experiences, is either you're away from it or you're in it. Like, the black hole is described as the space in the universe that holds infinite magnetism. And magnetism is related to time. The higher the magnetism, the more you're able to experience time within a second. And this does happen in the spiritual process. All right, so when people go to the black hole and come out of it, there is a recurring situation. I would say it is recursion unto itself. Something happens to people's minds in the New Age awakening process. So I'm sure you've heard this word, like when someone is looping. What does it mean when someone is looping? The other term I hear often is you're being spacey right now. You're like being spacey. Often, like, there's a loss of some element of language and some element of being able to think in structural ways. And the loop in many space holders, like I see it in a lot of people holding spaces, there seems to be this recurrence of terms of convergence, convergent terms, such as, I don't know, like it could be anything like love and light. Let's say love is a convergent term. Energy is a convergent term. Kundalini is a convergent term. I'm not going to write that. But another term is like trauma. The convergent terms would be that which is spoken again and again in a kind of loop, somehow meaning so much, yet to the point where it's spoken so often that it doesn't have any meaning at all. And I've seen that it's possible that people can loop for a very long time. It could take years, even a decade, where people enter into the aphasic light language area of the brain. And we will be studying structuralism in the blue calls, where we would look at the code and context aspects of the brain. That when people experience some kind of head trauma or brain trauma or spiritual awakening, people go either into code or context. Two different disorders in the brain. I've seen this happen after a stroke, but definitely I've seen this happen within spiritual retreats, the use of psychedelics, very deep inner dance processes, context. Disorders would be called contiguity disorder, and code disorder would be called similarity disorder. So we're not going to study that today. It's just to state that there's a loopiness that does take place. In linguistics, this has been observed, not in the spiritual element. It's called language recursion. And I think maybe some people might experience this as the kind of suffering that when you're trying to explain something, but you can't put it into words, and you tend to use the same words over and over again, but you mean something else. You mean something a lot more structural, a lot deeper, but you had not yet found time to put in the actual hours to break out of the recursion. So one of the topics that we would hold today is what is the loop and how does one break out of the loop? And without judging the loop, that the loop is like a bad thing. The loop is not a bad thing. There are many possible gains one can get out of being in the loop. Like in the Philippines, there are many almost superstitious experiences of the loop. Like I've met so many Filipinos who would experience looping in time, like they'd be riding a bicycle or taking a walk or being in a car, and then they would pass along a particular person, and then they would pass that person again and pass that person again, which is not possible unless you're driving around in a constant circle. And there is no such road in the world that just goes around and around. It doesn't go anywhere, but there is some sort of portal where you can enter the loop. And I would love to ask later, have you ever been to the loop? And when you go into the black hole, I feel that's one way of experiencing a particular word. Any situation, you can keep going around and around. There was a popular movie that came out many, many years ago. It's called Groundhog Day. And there have been many movies in Hollywood that portray the loop, like you wake up and it's still the same day. Could that be true? Is there really only one day? And is there really only one room? And is there really only one being pretending there's many? So at the height of the spiritual experience, I think it is possible to go into that dimensionality. Now, in the Violet, we were studying concepts, like what is a concept or a category? And we studied how in the mind, in order to organize your brain space, there are different levels of categories. There are these superordinate categories. And then there would be the basic level categories. And then there would be the superordinate categories. I think it would be interesting to bring this up again because it explains why people would prefer to go into the loop. So a superordinate category could be like God. For me, it's a superordinate category within spiritual contexts, but it would be something like a furniture or vehicle, as opposed to on the basic level, like car is a type of it's a kind of vehicle, and then like a sports car would be a sorry, you can correct me if you see I'm trying to write and speak at the same time. It's not easy. So this would be vehicle. So when you're a child, what do you learn first before you get to this? You make a distinction between different types of cars. For you, a car is a car. Normally, a child would learn a basic level first and then move over to this and this. Now, I feel one of the reasons why people would rather go into the convergent, the recursive, is that on a neurological basis, it takes a lot of energy to maintain subordinate systems like in the brain. Like how do we describe that? Okay, I need more space. So let's say we were looking at this from like a paramedical fashion. So let's say there would be these convergent terms that suddenly keep coming up through synchronicity in your space. It's like not just basic ones like love and light. It could be like resonance. It could be a specific number. I don't know what words are starting to come together in your brain. So let's say down here at the bottom of the pyramid, there would be the subordinate structures to work with a superordinate structure. Okay, so whatever this is, it's love, light, kundalini, energy, life force, divine feminine, something, something, earth. And down here would be, the more complex elements. So it doesn't take as much energy to hold these neurologically. So it is somewhat easier to just like get there. so that one can just loop around that basic terminology that represents anything, everything else anyway. And it takes like a lot more energy to hold like what is down here. So we might say there is an involution and an evolution process still at work here. What does it mean to grow up and to grow down? There are those two possibilities. Why would we want to hold like this dimension, for example? You know, what is the point? What is the benefit? And then what would be the benefit of just staying there over and over and over again? You know, like if you live in a spiritual community, maybe that's okay. And then once you try to interact with the institutions in the world, you might need to go down there. We're not going to invalidate either of these. They're both important. There are gifts. But this is just to say that it costs energy. This demands like energy expenditure. It costs time. You need to put in the hours. It costs you brain fuel, so that when you're studying, like in school or at work, you need to eat more. The more you're thinking, the more you're studying, you actually do get hungry, because your brain probably eats up more energy than any of the other organs in the body. So when you're dealing with abstract concepts, figurative, metaphorical concepts, it does cost energy. And there are certain levels of training your brain and your nervous system to be able to handle these. For those who would train people, you would need to learn how to invest energy into that. But the kind of work that we're doing is paradoxical, because the work that we're doing is this red arrow. We are leading people towards that. That is, in the beginning, the space we want to bring or tend people towards. My concern is that when people stay there too long, there isn't the level of maturation or development that helps people to integrate. So at one point, this bottom level is important. So I feel, okay, let me clean this up. I think just press the back button. I think what does happen here is there are many things happening here. Can discuss that more during the structuralism talks, but I feel that there are conversations happening here between all of these subordinate categories that people are holding inside. Like what does happen in inner dance is the thing at the top and the thing at the bottom are both happening. And when the body is moving, there is integration happening there. Like a word that I would bring up would be negotiation. So you know how it is when we are hearing the unspoken, let's say all of the trauma, all of the unprocessed things in the body that never got the chance to be seen, to be spoken to be understood. There are these unspoken spokenness undergoing conversations. So negotiations could be about like what one person needs that's not being met. It could be like an emotional need. It could be like a physical need. There could be metabolic processes at work. There could be homeostatic processes happening in the organs, the endocrine system, the nervous system, or to do with our enzymes, you know, neurotransmitters, hormones. There could be negotiations happening even on a chemical level. There are definitely negotiations happening in the neurological. So bringing up psychological would be just one. It could be informational negotiations where conceptual containers are moving from one to the other. So there is that. And I think the nature of the trainings that's kind of basic, particularly when things are called kundalini or energy, there is like a lot that is offered a person who simply goes there, where that sort of integration does happen. So I think going back to the phenomenology, like what are we accessing that allows for the bracketing or the epoche method that brings people into the core? Like in order to get to the core, we need to shut down certain systems. We need to turn off certain systems, like in the mind, the brain. Like let's say the hippocampus needs to shut down. Oh, sorry, the thalamus. Okay, it forgot it, so I need to rewrite. The 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 hippocampus, the thalamus, the amygdala, say the nucleus accumbens, they need to be rewired, and there's some rerouting that needs to take place. Those are particulars. I think maybe if we go to the brain maps, firstly, like the nerve tracts would be the pathways for electricity, and then going to subcortical. Like these are so near each other, but they're also undergoing competition. Like there's a competition between the amygdala. If the amygdala would hijack the prefrontal cortex, then emotions would take over, like rationality. And let's say this is memory, this is emotion. They are usually working with each other, but there is a way, or there are experiences where emotion do take over memory. And then you have the thalamus, which would be just the sensations, pure sensory information that doesn't need to be translated to what you remember and then what you emote to. And then these would be the striatum aspects, the basal ganglia that motivates you, that conducts behavior. So I think it's quite interesting to look at it from one brain part at a time. But I think there's something a lot more complex happening in the innerdance process. Like the question was, what do we need to shut down in order to conduct like an epoche or bracketing? You know, a suspension of belief, suspension of judgments. On the basic, we're learning to shut down the default mode network, which would still be a conglomeration of a whole bunch of different brain centers, from the cingulate cortex to the medial prefrontal cortex, could be the angular gyrus, the precuneus, the orbitofrontal cortex, a lot of which are responsible for the autobiographical, like how do you see yourself? So the default mode network would be that which turns on when you turn off, especially when your body is still, when you're not in locomotion, when you're not moving. Let's say you're just there, staring into space. Often you wouldn't be thinking about nothing. You're thinking about yourself. And the default mode network also helps you to think about others, thinking about others. So a lot of the basic techniques in inner dance were designed to shut down the default mode network. And when we construct new playlist systems, we're more conscious not to totally shut that down, because when you totally shut that down, like momentarily, like again and again every week, it could lead to problems of addiction and ego inflation, oversimplification. Also, the inability to remember many things, like memory systems tend to shut down when the default mode network is by spiritual practice, like shut down over and over again. So we are interested in heightening intelligence levels. So I feel a lot of people in the world are learning to access the default mode network. When people do psychedelics, it is to shut down the default mode network. That's what the studies seem to show. It shuts down during many parts of the psychedelic journey. But I feel there's a reason why a lot of kids play games, but also adults. You know, like in the Philippines, when I go to a shop and when I try to buy something, the clerk is always playing a game. It's like, do you not want me to buy something? They're even pissed off I'm disturbing them. I feel that because so many people have unprocessed information in both mind and body, they're playing games because games have a powerful way of turning on the default mode network. So that even while they're doing something, their mind is doing something else. There are these negotiations taking place. And in the blue calls, we'll talk about the structuralism of the brain mind that's related still with time and space. And what is happening in space is selection, like you reach into the ocean of ideas and then you select what is the right word to put into the sentence that I'm creating right now. How do I put in the thoughts that follows the thought that came prior to what is being thought of right now? Selection, and then you combine that. That is the structuralism that happens in the playlisting system, that when you select the right song, then you put that together in a sequence, then you're doing that. So selection comes up in evolution theory, natural selection. And in Darwin, natural selection is a competition happening within the species or between species. That this is how we evolved. We evolved through fighting. that we're ever in the present, like soldiers, and life is a war. Every time you go into life, you're gonna have to fight your way through the day. And if you survive the day, then okay, you can breathe, you're good. So games are matching this. Like most games are competitive and not coming out of cooperation or communion or conservation or even conversion, like how we heal the world. So this doesn't need to be so kind of, dark as a concept. In language, there is natural selection always happening. This is something intrinsic in the mind. And for those who have not had the space in order to conduct the negotiations, say you grew up too fast, and I believe most people in the world had grown up too fast. It's like we get these directives or injunctions or projections from the father and the mother and the school, the government. You need to grow up. You need to learn this. You need to do better in school. So there hasn't really been the space to negotiate. And for that, innerdance provides exactly that space. So learning what types of music will bring about certain dimensions of negotiation. It could be like an emotional negotiation. It could be an energetic. In innerdance, we've been more and more interested in the cosmic or even the planetary system of negotiating. Not just negotiating what is in the person, but negotiating what is in the human, that didn't grow up so well, that there was this arrested development. Right? So going back to this map then, this triangle or this pyramid, there is this tendency in people to try to go to the top of the pyramid. And growth, paradoxically, on this model, I could have drawn like another type of pyramid where involution usually is what goes down and evolution is what goes up. A lot of you are in this training group or in this community because you are interested in not just looping, but like how to break out of like the loop, right? So I think what is interesting is that the truth is that this is really just one mapping. Like we live in a world where you have to interact with other people's mappings, and a person is not a person anymore. Like every time you meet a person, that person isn't really just one mapping. There's like a ton of mappings within one person because a person belongs to a culture, and each concept a person holds is contextual and in a cultural way. So like we need to develop a brain or a mind that's able to listen to all those negotiations that haven't been heard, that would be able to shift the competitive into the cooperative. It's not a small task, particularly let's say you're holding a space, and rather than if like a mandala or like a merkaba would be one person, let's say you're holding 10 people or 20 people, like you're holding 20 negotiations, and what's being negotiated is like still like meta negotiation. It's like all these small negotiations within like one big negotiation. How to learn to speak to that requires techniques and perspectives that would really just be mind-blowingly amazing. And I do believe a lot of you are approaching that, and for that, like we're seeking to understand um, like what we're holding here. So I think the structure is here. Like we're looking at the default mode network as that which we are shutting down in the inner dance process. And a lot of people, like I say, kids and adults playing games on their phones, they're accessing that because it helps them to think properly. You can achieve that through exercise as well. Some forms of meditation can access the default mode network. So I think this redefines the old system of meditation where you're supposed to go out of the mind. I think learning more about the default mode network would help us to understand, rather than trying to go out of the mind, what does it mean to go into the mind, right? Um, so let's go back to phenomenology and see or think about what are the things phenomenology can teach us, that which in inner dance is a new phenomenology. Like inner dance is a new style of bracketing that maybe helps some of the gaps that Edmund Husserl and Merleau-Ponty and the other phenomenologists didn't see, because they did not have access to the neurosciences that we do enjoy today. So I had a particular experience with this one lady. Her name's Ash. Ash. She's Malaysian. So this happened in Kuala Lumpur. And I had one inner dance where, so let's say this is Ash. Let's make it a female Ash. That's like a female. And then she laid down. All right. So you know her name already. Can minimize this. No, this might be useful. Let's not take it out, right? Delete. So this is Ash, right? And then I was the one holding the space. So this is pi. So I'm vertical. She's horizontal. I'm awake. She's like there in her dream state. So she wasn't expecting anything. We didn't know what was going to happen. We did a private session in her condo, like a one-on-one experience. So what made this one particularly interesting, and I've had sessions that were like this one, but not as clear, and they weren't recorded. Like what makes this partially important is this, it was recorded. So as soon as she laid down, what she had been formulating in her, let's say it could be in her brain or it could be in her whole body. Let's say she was building an intention. Let's say the intention was building. And in the last call, we looked at intention, like a kind of retrocausal determinism that takes place. Even before you think about it, you're already starting to behave towards that thing that is happening in the body. So as the intention builds, normally when that intention builds in people, that could get translated into a behavior or also an expression, meaning I would say it. After I think about it, I would say it. And the gap would be very, very minimal. I'm thinking it and then I'm saying it. So there could be an expression, and let's say the movement is a part of that. So let's say normally what you think you're intending, then you would say it, and then you would express it through your body. So what happened with Ash, and this would help to explain what does happen in the facilitation space, more space, is the facilitator space holder basically starts to feel that intention. And then the expression and the movement might in fact take place in the facilitator's body. So maybe one way of symbolizing this is like, okay, that could be an intention symbolically. And then what was weird in that moment was I would say it. So let's come up with some weird symbol. Let's say the infinity symbol. So in an oversimplified sense, let's say as soon as she was intending infinity, I would speak it. Okay, would that not be weird? That as soon as as like there was no gap. That's how she was explaining it. Like as soon as the intention was there, I would say it, and then it just kept going on and on within the space of like an hour. I would suddenly just say things, and I didn't know I was saying it. But eventually, she said that you said it because I was thinking it. Like everything that you said was exactly what I wanted to say. So how she described that was you became the voice of my ego. And when I became the voice of her ego, because the ego was talking, there was no separation, and that brought her into this experience of the whole universe. Basically, she went into the black hole because she realized that there was no separation. Like everything was pre-planned. In her words, it was conditioned before she even knew that it was there. So let's look at the exact words that she spoke. Here, it's over here. Keynote. All right. So this, yeah, this is what she percent, and then the movement. These were the recorded words when she shared after. The movement preempted what you were going to say, which made me realize it's already in the unconscious, the unspoken, which means that every act and every speech and every movement and every intention, it's already pre-planned. It's conditioned before I even knew it was there. That's what she said, like kind of just shortcutted. It was so clear that it's the same moment. All right. So I want to take this beyond just the Pi Ash dialogue. I want to just clarify that all space holders are doing this exact same thing. That when the connection is made, you are the, let's say this is within a psychological or clinical psychological construct, there is no difference between the analysis, the analysand, and the analyzer. Like the observer, the observed, and the observing all become like one in the same thing. And the moment you're simply speaking it without actually becoming the other, it's not the same sort of space. It's not a bracketing or an epoche space. It's not a phenomenological reduction. So let's go back to the words. So I would ask these words like, what is time? And then she would experience what is beyond. She would say she experienced this, that there's no time. And then I would ask like, what are thoughts? And then she would experience the answers as what is transcended or what is beyond. So I think this is important to bring up in relationship to the mapping on the default mode network, right? So here's my tendency when I do hold a space. one way I can help people break out of the long-term loop is to think about what are the questions that I could hold that could um, define the level of bracketing. Is there anything before that? What would be the dimension of bracketing that happens? Would it be personal bracketing, a planetary bracketing? So there would be different questions, like who are you would be a kind of question, or what are you afraid of? What are your fears? What do you fear the most? That can be very provocative. Um, and when you ask these questions, what you would be activating still would be default mode network, guided by, let's say, this one here, the fear question. What you would activate would be the DMN plus the amygdala, and that is very, very possible. Who are you would activate the DMN plus the hippocampus, which should be memory. So it could either be DMN plus emotions or the default mode network and the hippocampus. Remember, the DMN is like how you understand or see yourself and how you are thinking about others. So that would be operating throughout the whole hour, depending on what you're asking. So when people are asked, because what we are doing is when people are laying down and you are bracketing in that sense, bracketing would be creating a space where anything can happen, right? There are no conditionings, there are no programmings, and you're allowing people to be what they are. When you do speak these questions, you're not speaking to people's minds or personas. You're allowing the whole body to receive the input. And then when the whole body receives the question, the whole body would respond, not as the ego, but it might respond as the energy. It might respond as flow. It might respond as the planet. It might respond as the universe. And I do feel that humans are longing to be seen as what they really are, not just who they are. So going back to this, can you see the difference? That when I ask these questions that are normally not asked a person, these are what you might ask like the universe or earth or pure consciousness is able to see beyond the historicity of linear time, right? Then that's one of the contributors that brought Ash into the kind of experiences that I am describing, right? I didn't tap into the default mode network. What I did was to tap into a greater energy field in the body that might even go beyond how we normally understand the brain from a reductionist and deterministic part of you. The extended mind and the embodied brain isn't really just the brain being here. So what you're speaking to is the whole body. And when you're able to wonder at what would be the questions that would speak to not just what is the person, but what is in the person, or what is containing the person, what is outside the person as well, the orientation would be very, very different. So be careful about the context. Not careful as in scared, but have great care as to what contexts that you are holding. The music that you hold is super important, but the dialogue that goes on top or alongside the music would be just as important. So when you would ask, like, what is time? You know, like that wouldn't exactly be the question you would ask. I'm pretty sure a lot of the context you guys are holding, you wouldn't say that, but there might be less personalizing or less loopy spaces that just makes people keep going back to their memories again and again, like looping again and again. What can help them to see things in a different way that's operating in you know, like the maybe a lower part of the pyramid. So let's go back to Ash because there are some things there. There are gems here that I would like to. I don't know how to operate. Okay, so the first question that I asked, and Ash said, okay, yeah, the first question. You can see how I formulated it. I didn't say, where were you before you were born? But I would say it like this, like, what did you look like before you came here? And there's a reason why I would ask it that way, you know, like it's less personal and it's coming from a third person point of view. It talks to the witness rather than what's being witnessed. So I'm distancing the you and then the other you, where the before you came here would not be Ash anymore. But this is still speaking to Ash. So I'm carefully formulating this in a way that would allow the question to be received beyond the personalizing filtration system that is the DMN. And then she would have these experiences that's bracketing already. It's like she was shocked because all of these insights that would start to come that would voice unto itself. She said, when it answered, she didn't say, I said it or you said it. It's like when it answered, the answers were coming from a totally different place, like something way, way beyond what is known and what is here. Okay, and then the second question that I asked was, what is that question? Like, what do you look like after you're done here? So instead of asking, what happens after you die? That is a very, very different kind of energy as receiving. Like, what would you look like after you're done here? It feels more objective. It doesn't really bring the sticky connotations of death. And then she had these to say, you know, it went beyond just the image container. My body just felt like a shell. It was a skeleton. I was not identified with the body. I was not the body. It was so clear that I'm not neither the mind nor the body. So this is what I mean about bracketing. I'm making specific what I mean about inner dance being a phenomenological enterprise. That I have a choice to make someone go into a phenomenon. Okay, like give them something that they can see. It's like, okay, get them to see like a childhood memory. But because there are infinite variations of even just one memory, all of that at a certain point would become a phenomenon. There would be instances where it's important to see that phenomenon, but then to bracket it and to bring it into a whole different plane would depend on how you're contextualizing or even verbalizing the questions. So then I told her, so this happened because it was spoken to and because it was not expecting anything, which is what phenomenology is about, you know, like suspending judgments, biases. It actually heard it. It became it, and it heard it. It became it. So I wasn't speaking to her, in other words. Like, that's what I want to clarify. I don't speak to people. I speak to the it in people. You know, whatever it is, it's that which is super old and super big that hasn't been heard. And when that is the one that is listening, it then takes over the other system. Which a lot of you would appeal to. That's what I experienced. Like that the space, the person holding your space is able to circumvent your filters, found a way to position your body and to bring about the stimuli that speaks to that other system that would take over the normal system. Okay, so it's paradoxical. This one's a little bit confusing, but it wasn't really interesting that she mentioned the word phenomena. Wait, so let me skip and then move to here. So she was trying to figure it out, and within the dialogue, she realized that the movement preceded the thought. All right, let's write this down. Let's create another map for this. This is the long mystery. So remember, like normally you would have the intention. Let's say the intention is a thought, and then the thought could be realized as a spoken expression, like usually a spoken word. Like in this case, like we didn't go so much into that. This is supposed to go away. Go away. Yeah. And then there's the movement. And this is something we're interested in, like how the movement emerges in the body. The body starts to move on its own. All right. So the question here is what comes first? And we did take this up in the last meeting, like in terms of free will versus determinism. What is more causal? Is it that the thought causes the movement? But somehow, even in the neurosciences, we're realizing that the movement started already even before we are thinking of it. Okay, so the space holder is often going to be speaking something, and this is how I've been experiencing it. And the space held, the participant was thinking about it even before it was said. So let's say the body is moving, and then they're seeing something, and then usually in terms of causation and the theory of association of ideas, when someone makes a sound, say this is a sound, a spoken word, or more like okay, there's this thing that was spoken. So say I say the word TREE, and because someone heard that, there would be the stimuli being received, therefore hitting let's say the hippocampus and the frontal cortex, the thalamus, then it would construct an experience is coming from that. But to the participant in this retrocausality, they would realize that there's time is going backwards. Like it's almost like this is causing this to happen. That's one of the ways people are experiencing this in utter disbelief, especially when the body begins to move. Let's say I'm just making this wave to assume the body is moving. It could be happening here, or even here. Let's say the whole thing is moving. Everything's vibrating. It's almost like the movement precedes the intention. The movement seems to be formulating what would be expressed like in the environment or the ecosystem environment. That's really cool, right? It predicts what word you're going to use, and then it copies your handwriting. So I just wrote 3 letters and I came up with that. It's the chicken or egg, or nature versus nurture. What comes first? And in this practice, it seems like the movement, that inner or outer movement, seems to be directing what is happening in the world. So we become the primal force. We create, we construct, we birth a universe through the intentionality that begins in the body. So that's what facilitators need to hold true, because that is the perspective that allows trust to be what holds the space. If it's not the person, it's this set of conditions that brings about that level of contact, and trust allows these two beings to become one. So there's still this question: what comes first? Well, can't be messier. The thought or the movement. So this this conversation between Ash and me, we're looking at this very, very intently. And she was already stating that the movement clearly preceded the thought, that somehow the movements of her body, and then me expressing what she was already seeing and intending inside, something was being retrocausal, like causality was reversed. So then I asked her, why does the movement come before the thought? You know, okay, so this is already paradoxical. Usually the thought comes before the movement. You think about it and then you move your body based on what you're intending. Because the thought is the expression of the movement. And so the movement and expression of something comes before it. When she was saying that she was muttering to herself, it wasn't clear. The body is an expression of the heart, okay? Because the movement is nonverbal, it is a higher expression compared to the words. I think this is quite deep, and I'm going to leave it to you to explain to yourself what that could mean. And then this is her answer. She's like, I get it. What comes even before the movement? What comes before the movement? And here's where she became suddenly a phenomenologist. Like, you know, she wasn't speaking about phenomenology, but she kept repeating the word. It was so phenomenal. The whole experience is phenomenal. But she arrives at this, which is the central idea of Husserl's phenomenology. Everything begins with intentionality. Now, there is a difference between intention and intentionality. Ash is describing intentionality. She said, the it is the curiosity of consciousness that's always dancing, evolving, moving. If all thoughts are energy, the energy is always moving because it's the intention to move, which is translated to the thought that I want to move. But actually, the intention already initiated the movement of all things. So when she does refer to intentionality here, it's coming from a much, much larger space. And it's the intentionality. If it would be the movement of all things, it would be the intentionality of all things. So I think this would maybe contribute to the debate whether intentionality is coming from the subject or the object, the thinker or the what is being thought about. It's the system, the original system that became curious of itself. She goes on, and maybe we can bring this up another time. So there is a slide here that does define phenomenology. It's a study of the structures of consciousness from the first person point of view. I bring that up primarily because here we are studying phenomenology from the third person point of view, the objective point of view, that which is transcendent of the ego. This could be interesting to think about from a life review perspective. So when you die, coming from the accounts of those who have died for a long time, how the near-death experiences described it was, let's say you die, you say, I'm dead, I died. And then suddenly you become aware of all of your experiences that was your whole life. Your whole life flashed before your very eyes in a moment, like less than a second. You saw your whole life in a Groundhog Day, infinite black hole space. Like everything is seen from a loop. You know, like all the potentialities of every moment is looked at, but the person isn't looking at it from how you looked at it. You will look at it as the third person. So this is weird. This is very hard to explain. How the near-death experiences would explain it. Like, I became everything that I had ever experienced. Okay, how to explain it? So let's say this is you as a cute fetus being born. Let's say this is you, your baby. And all you had was a self, and the universe was inside the self. So in order to transition from this to here, there has to be a transition to, let's say, the world. The transition would require something called projection. There's a necessary way in which the baby needs to project itself outwards into its room, its clothes, its mom, its dad, the words that it uses. It starts to plant the essence of itself. It projects the essence of its universe into the objects around it. So when you die, there will be the opposite that happens. The opposite of projection is reception. So this is happening in the inner dance. I want to believe that this is also what's happening in inner dance, that you are dying and you're being born in the inner dance. And what happens is um, you start to receive all these concepts into the body. Let's say you call it the world. You become the world. Okay. So I think we can go back to Ash, the thing that I skipped. Where was that? It's the intention. So, okay. Now I get it. It's the intention. So we talked about this weird topic regarding, so it's a what if. She brought it up. And when you look at the word if, it's at the heart. The heart is the middle of a specific word. If you look at the word if, it's at the heart of the word life. It's the letters in the middle. When you look at the word death, at the middle of the word death is EAT. You eat to live, yet every moment you're dying. What exactly does that mean? I mean, not exactly, but the baby is eating the world. The baby's consuming the world, and that's part of the projection process. I think that's why we consume. It's actually a form of projection. Like we take in the world within, and as such, we also somehow create like an outer world by taking something in. You're able to project all these objects that you take in like outside the world. So when you die, the world eats you in that opposition sense. Like technically, I would still say that then you eat the world, but in this contrast, the world becomes you. Like all of these things that you ever saw, the things in your room, the things in your laptop, your iPhone, all your contacts, all your friends, everyone you ever met, they will enter you and you will have no resistance. It could be like your ex-girlfriend, your ex-boyfriend, everything that you hate and love, it would enter into you and you go, I see. I get it. I see it. Yeah. You talk to all of it like without bias, without judgment. Say, okay, I get it. That's why you did that. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay, without really judging anything, it's just pure information. There is no valuation whether you did a good job or you did a bad job. You could have been the worst, or you could have been like Hitler, for example, and you're like, oh, okay, I see, I'm still God, but then I had to do that because then that made all the other stuff happen, forced this, that, created contrast, so this is happening in the inner dance process. Like I can't remember how many times people explained this type of thing taking place in their bodies. And this for me brings about like a much deeper explanation of the black hole and the process. Like we ended this weird dialogue from this thing that seems so unrelated. So I learned something from this pie. I never allowed myself to trust myself because of that thing that you spoke about me. I'm always trying to be nice. Now, Ash is she's female. She's Chinese Malaysian. Ash is probably the most trusting person I know, but more like she trusts others. So she was the perfect inner dance person to work with because every time she's in the room, every time you meet the people who are trusting the most, they go deepest. And Ash was the most trusting person I knew back then. She held no judgments for anyone. There was never any resistance, but she is stating now she doesn't trust herself. Um, and so we would maybe look at this deeper in the green process where we would study the differentiation between um, shame, shame and guilt cultures. So it doesn't fit. It needs to. The Chinese are part of shame cultures, and in shame cultures, the other is more the community or the family is more important than the individual. In guilt cultures, the individual is more important than the collective. Okay, so maybe in the Middle East, in Africa, in Asia, you would see more of shame cultures. And this is what Ash is mapping out here. And I was mapping out something different where I feel ego is allowed when the ego is holding the collective. And this is very interrelatable to what's happening here. Like you become the collective upon death. And yet the individual is the collective somehow. So the inner dance happens because we allow ourselves to receive what's being projected in the world. We live in a world where people are projecting onto each other, and one word to describe this from a cultural or even anthropological standpoint is blame. It's like, it's not my fault, it's your fault. Like, you started it, you threw bombs at me, and now I'm gonna throw bombs at you. You punch me in the face, I'll punch you back. You started it, it's your fault. So how do we heal the world that's operating from so much projection? Someone's got to receive it. Someone's got to receive it. And there might be persons in the family that are more receiving than projecting. Most likely, if you are in this kind of community and energy process, you're the receiver. The receiver is the empath. The receiver is the the one who has the higher sensitivity to see what is not being spoken beneath the competition, you know, the imagery, the narcissism, the need to have one person be better than the other. Someone's got to absorb that. So this is what we're doing. To quote, let's say Jesus Christ said, "The least amongst you will be the greatest." And you know, the thing with the Lord of the Rings, the one who can hold the ring of power is always the smallest. So you need to be humbled. And the act of asking someone to lay down studies humility from that standpoint. We are allowing individuals to become the collective, which is in many ways the scariest thing for so many people. Like, I don't want to receive criticism. I don't want people to say like, oh, I'm such a bad person and I am the worst and I did the wrong thing. That's not supposed to be how you operate. That's like the worst thing. I'm not saying you be that. I'm just saying, if no one is going to receive all the seeming badness and convert that into light, to convert darkness into light, then we're still operating from an old story, like an old system. And a lot of people in energy work, they're not actually clear with this. They're getting excited at the amount of power that is given the one holding the space, the amount of like money and the amount of like, oh, I'm gonna be the hero, the healer, the teacher. The process is exactly built on the opposite. That's why terminology is being used is quite important. So I feel that if there was a concept to hold this, like the most ancient phenomenological instance would be the pharmacological, like the pharmakos is an ancient Greek term that was taken up by the deconstructionist philosopher Jacques Derrida. There was a time in evolution, you know, the proto-manifestations of medicine was not making a distinction between the concept of the poison and the medicine. All right, so in the original, the tribal, the indigenous time, the medicines came from poison. All right, so we live in a world that is intentionally avoiding pain. I'll put that there in the middle, pain, and seeking pleasure, blissing out, like, hedonism would be the word. Like, I'm here to seek pleasure. That's why I'm here. I'll be a billionaire and I'll just have fun and just bliss out. And we've already taken up in the last Zoom calls that the more you go into pleasure seeking, the dopamine system will actually bring about pain. So hedonists are going into depression because of their pain avoidant pleasure seeking ways or tendencies. And then the ones who are not avoiding pain are in fact receiving the true medicine. So I feel um, like like a lot of you are healing the world by learning to accept the pain body of the world and the work that you're doing. This is hard to express, that what you're allowing is a kind of death where people can receive the projections, right? I want you protected, I want you safe, because when you do hold spaces, you will be exposing yourself to a lot of projections. Like, I'm holding a particular lady right now in Canada. She used to be a CAP facilitator, and she's receiving a lot of projections coming from a participant who's like saying, "Oh, I didn't get the bliss that I wanted. I blame you. I want to sue you. I want to sue all the whole CAP community," and so on and so forth. I'm helping to hold her space because for me, I actually honor those who can receive that well, those projections, and not run away and not fight, not. This for me is very personal because when I was growing up, I had always been absorbing the pain body of my bully classmates going to an all boys school in Manila. I was very, very small, and I was always absorbing the negativities that people couldn't express because of the family systems they were part of. These rich kids who had nothing better to do but just to be boys. I was getting punched and hit and bullied and abused, and my friends didn't understand what are you doing? But I actually loved them. I didn't love the bullying. No one should, but I loved the bully, and I understood like why it was happening. So for me, I had to work on that later on. Like, a lot of the bullying came from my dad, and I had to live in the conditions, those conditions, the island conditions, because I had to accept the projections, the judgments. For me, maybe that's the phenomenological enterprise. The true phenomenology is to absorb like all this stuff and can like really like I convert it. It's all energy, it's. I'm gonna stop the share. um Wait, I'm gonna put that back in its stand. um let's start there and just yeah, it's like that this is what we're doing. It's I think that's what the energy is for. That this is precisely what it's for. Like, we are here to convert darkness into light, that we are the person in the room who holds no judgments and is able to see things as they are. And I think what would do it for people is still access to time and space. And if people don't have the resources and the time to go to the Maldives or to find an island somewhere, that time is vibratory. That when they lay down, they become old, and then they are finding the space where they don't need to keep traveling to Bali or Thailand or Mexico. They can travel the earth within themselves, and they can grow old and big in that way. Because the objectivity can come from that, like oldness. And I think that would help the judgment if people could just have that space to see the thing that they're projecting to, like this. I don't like that. That's a bad thing. If you slow down enough. So that's how it was with my dad. It's like I hated my dad so much because of the amount of abuse that I received from him. And then when I was living in solitude, I realized that like he's actually my teacher. And then I understood like what he had gone through. I developed my empathy to realize that I'm him and he's me. And if I don't work on myself, that, you know, reaches into his unfulfilled parts of himself, um, all blame stopped for me after that. Like I just decided that I was going to take responsibility over everything. And that then allowed me to just trust absolutely everything. Okay, so that's me. That's my orange. Um, I'm hoping that this brings to you like much to think about, to study, to feel into, so that when you yourself are holding the space, what is trust about? What does it really mean to do the work, to go inside? Um, like for many people, this might be like a concept, but because what we're holding is experiential, and what we are experiencing is also what we are beginning to know. We're crossing dimensions. We're crossing into a much deeper dimension, which is called the black hole. And that's a scary thing. Like for most humans, it's like, why would I want to go there? That's like, you know, but you would stabilize there, you would normalize there, you become ancient, you become old, you become just you in it, like that you as the universe. And that becomes like your work. Um, all right, so I'm going to open the space for insights. I would love to hear from you. The orange is deep. Um, there's a lot of concepts here, like what comes together for you. If you want to hold a question for the group as well, and we can all look at the insights together. Thank you for listening.
Well, thanks for that, Pi. It's awesome. Just bear with me. I just made a couple of notes. Okay, so a couple of things that you said there really sort of resonated with me, because I've actually been working on or trying to write about them during the week. So just move that. You said going from the orange to the black, and it really interested me. It's like going from being a sun to an unknown potential of a black. And the other thing you said was, how does one break out of a loop? And during the week, someone I just really love, and they help me look at turn things upside down and look at things from a different perspective. And he said this quote, I think it was his own quote, but if the self were to move, there would be light. And it just really got me so interested in. I think it was also something you said also a couple sessions ago. I think you said to change, we need to move. I've just made some PowerPoints out of just what's been said today, and those little quotes. It's like one may need to change the way they move to facilitate a sustainable change. And that movement is not just like change the way you walk or change, go to an innerdance session and start moving a bit differently. Like, is it just a physical thing, or is it like a more concentrated way we change? An internal change as well, internal movement. How do we move that? And what are just some basic little, I don't know what you call it, changes we can make to our life to facilitate that, even if it's just a temporary change. So, yeah, not just to change the way you move externally, but also internally. And that where you come into the bracketing, like I am vegan, I am a carnivore. Okay, so what if all those vegans out there went and said, I'm going to be a carnivore and just eat carnivore, and all the carnivores went out there and said, I'm going to be a vegan? How would that change your internal movements? How would that change the density of what's moving around and the speed of what's moving internally? How would that affect your connection to others that you probably didn't felt connected to? Mate, I don't know. The vegans that have just gone carnivore are starting to have gratitude for animals providing a food source rather than just being a pretty fuzzy little things. Are the carnivores going out there looking at animals as, oh, how do you eat that? It's so beautiful, you know. Would it just give you a total perspective? So, you know, that we just get, it's like you're saying before, that bracket, we just define ourselves and others. It really helps us to progress by, you know, being different. So, as I said, like the carnivore vegan, it's a simple way of eating, and your experiences and biblical experiences is fasting. Like it's talk about a lot, but it's probably not done as much. You know, what would fasting bring? How would that change the way you move internally rather than just externally? Would that help you becoming comfortable? Like that fasting would bring you to a state of delusion, like what confusion, just what's going on. Just by changing that internally, would that make you more comfortable with being delusional, with change, with pushing boundaries? So, and then when you're talking about the black again, like that if one continues to shimmer light, your experience of today, you're shimmering in the light of this daylight, and at night you go into the black, and the next morning you wake up and you shimmer back into the light, and next day, that night, you shimmer back into the black. What would happen if, when you're shimmering from black to light, and everything you experienced in that day, you dropped it? Pretty much just like, there's a junk bit on my computer, delete. Just drop it all, which it basically dropping the classification, the brackets. Is that, if we keep entering the black of night with that memory of what happened today or yesterday, does that bypass the mystical, infinite, creative force of the black could provide the next day you wake up, because you wake up with an expectation of how your partner's going to get out of bed and walk up? What if you just dropped how your partner's just deleted it, how they're going to get up, walk up? Would that just change everything? Like completely just off the rail. And then that brings me to sort of summarize that. If one continues to facilitate the body into perpetual, similar internal and external movements, does that, if you change that, does that change the density and the frequencies of what you're emitting to bring new change, attract different people with different views, attract or see, maybe they're just not different people you're attracting with different views. They're the same people, but you're seeing a different side of them. You're not just keeping them in that bracket, or keeping yourself in that bracket as a reflection of such, I guess. So I guess you've got to ask, what I'd ask out of that is familiarity your friend? And then you're talking about the pyramids before. I've spoken about this before. And actually, this has all come out of Floors retreat about a year ago where I started to dissect the Star of David and the Seal of Solomon. And if you look at all of our, like as growing up as a child, you might get a sticker, or a teacher might do a little star of approval on some homework you've done. That's nearly like a sign of approval. You've done well, fantastic. So imagine if you got that seal of Solomon, Star of David, two pyramids overlap, and you pulled each end of them up so it's two triangles with a space in the middle of the two triangles. It's just, and you look at the triangles as an infinite, a sign of the infinite, like, you know, three equal sides of endless potential. It's just a never-ending number, really, never-ending measurement. So you've got those two triangles, you hold them up there, and in our society, you look at that and go, oh, one's representing the arrow up and one's representing the arrow down. That's pretty cool. We all relate to that. And if you look at that in an awakening process, one would represent this up arrow would recommend, a progression of the awakening in somebody. An arrow down would represent a regression. And you can look at that as either being regression or progression. But how about, okay, so that's up. Up is regression. Down's down. Down is regression. Up is progression. But how about if we just put those two triangles and overlay each other, and it comes back as that star of approval, that the seal of approval. That's good. And that, to me, that's almost stating like up is down, regression is progression. It's all one. It's just a symbol of all one, complete. There's no, you can interpret it whatever way you want. It's just good is bad, bad is good. Yeah, it's just like, it's amazing, that little symbol, how much it can be separate, but all can be separate, but all can be one. So yeah, I'll just leave it at that. So thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a lot of thoughts listening to you, but now it's really integrated in the way you closed. Anyone else would like to share anything about the orange topics? I want to show something from it's still related a little bit to some things Brendan spoke. So yeah, orange is the new black. And like, I think it's really interesting that what we're avoiding is the void. I think this is partly what Brendan's speaking. Freud had this notion of the death drive, and then in Jacques Lacan, like his contemporary, Lacan talks about desire, asking what is desire, and because Lacan was a structuralist, he was interested in how there were certain things in language that is psychological in a way that when we speak the words one word at a time, we are never really arriving at the point. And the desire is the quintessential point. It's like, do we ever get to the point? So a lot of us, we might be experiencing language where we're saying a lot of words, but we don't get to the point, and it doesn't feel satisfactory when we're in the dialogue. It's not arriving at a point. I'm trying to say something and not getting there. So I think he wrote that in the essay, The Unconscious, in the letter. Um, I am experiencing language that does arrive at the point, and I need to have the point clear before I even speak the first word. So when I prepare for a talk, for example, and when I work in the pyramid, I put in the hours to see what is being negotiated like down here in this whole range here. And I go over my notes, I go over everything in the colors that represents like from the red all the way to the violet, like all these topics regarding life and energy and the universe and whatnot. Not just my stuff, but the world stuff. You know, what has the world been processing? So going back to Lacan, he gets to a point where him and Freud arrive at the death drive. That at the end of the day, what do we really desire? And do we ever get to the point, you know, like I want this, I need that, I want that, and it seems to be bottomless for humans. But where that seems to stop would be death itself. Like maybe this is what we desire, because if death is the universe, maybe that's where we get fulfilled. You know, that's where wholeness comes back into full circle. I don't believe that you need to die and to experience death. I do believe that there is a way to access death in life. I do like that the word if is in the middle of the word life. In Filipino, the word life is buhay. So the middle of the word buhay is the first cry, the first sound. The middle of the word death in Filipino is this one, which is the eye. So in death, you actually open the eye, which is the image, and in life, it's the first sound, which is quite beautiful and amazing. But I think people are not able to access life because of the obsession on certainty, and yet it was Albert Camus who said, when you conquer death, anything is possible. And I think people are in resistance. I work a lot with people with all sorts of maladies, like patients with cancer and diabetes and all kinds of sicknesses. And when I work with medical systems, the more I'm able to help people look at their own death, that's when they live. It's so strange. The moment they're not scared of dying is the moment they live. So I think people are avoiding it. They're avoiding the void when in fact, this is what we want. What do we want? We want the black, but we're trying to go for the light. I think the whole world is so opposite in this way. We're avoiding the void, and so I'm just fixing this. If we have human beings that are not running away from it, I think addictions would go away and like all kinds of problems would get settled. But how to speak this? You know, how to speak this to conservative minds, minds that are in terror management, which is the height of death denial. Like so a lot of people are incredibly wealthy because they're afraid of death. That's what terror management theory speaks. A lot of people have achieved the heights of the human possibility, you know, powerful people, athletes, and just powerful people. And when they die, like a lot of people around them, and I experienced this lately, it's like, what now? Okay, so you had that, then it's gone. What was the point? So I think that's hard to speak to because of the motivated way people are going for life as certainty, life without if, right? Life without the if. It needs to be an assurance. And in fact, phenomenology came out of Husserl's needing to be certain about the structures of consciousness, and he fails at that. So this brings us deeper into what Brendan was holding for us. There is something about the body that is the movement in the body. So psychology right now is taking into accord that how we shape our concepts was based on how we initially moved our body in space. So I think even before worrying about what food we're putting into our bodies, into our mouth, it's about like what is the energy that gets hungry in the first place. And so you can be a vegan, but you can be tight, which is a spatial orientation. You could be carnivorous and you could be raw, like wild. You could be roaming the earth without fear. So is the veganism coming from fear, or is it coming from lightness and and so on and so forth? How are you perceiving death? Like in a way, are you afraid of death, or are you truly alive in a way that you're not attached to anything and then you're not scared of death? So I think in terms of movement, because we are studying inner dance, which frees the movement in people's minds and bodies. It can't just be conceptual. I'm free. I'm liberated. But if that's stored in your body, that's not really experientiable. It's not experiential. It's not what you are holding on the day to day. So I think to change the movements in the body has to do with how you orient yourself in the space. And a lot of those orientations, culturally, psychologically, for many people are tight. It's tight. It doesn't matter how much movements happens in the inner dance session to go back out in the world, and still there's this tightness, this judgment, this um, protectionism. It's evil out there. It's so bad out there. The two triangles meeting would be everything's actually good. Even the bad is good, and the good is not so bad. It's all in equilibrium somehow. So working with this kind of music, getting people to go into that horizontal space and working with this kind of music trains the body to hold both the high and the low. There's less judgment. It's like I'm meeting people in the inner dance community who experiences super hot water, and then they said that doesn't seem like hot water. It's super cold. Their nervous system is accessing these polarities, and there's some homeostatic space in between that's taking hold. So I do believe that human beings are becoming very, very old humans in the last decades because of access to technology, to psychotropic mechanisms that's really extending the brain into some sort of global brain, like McLuhan's global village. It's like the whole world is becoming a nervous system, that the whole world is becoming like a global brain. And as such, the changes are so fast that a lot of people aren't able to cope with it. So music being the one that holds the high and the low contrast in the most vibratory way, music being the language of vibration. The kind of practice that we do is preempting the new human that's going to have this new brain. In the past, that's like a schizophrenic brain. That's like a weird, crazy brain that's one day up there, another day down there. That's called bipolar. But to have this kind of playlisted brain that's able to hold both equanimously, no matter what's happening outside, that for me is non-duality. It's non-judgment. It's a true non-duality. In that space, nothing is spiritual anymore. Everything is, even spirituality is really just a word all of a sudden. It's just like everything. Um, there's so much to what you said, Brendan, and so thank you, based on how you're really working on this in you and you're living it. All right. Like, anyone else would like to contribute to the call, and then we'll close soon. If you don't have any more insight, what are the insights that you picked up today? And then we'll go even deeper in call number 2.
Hi.
Hey, you.
um, so I have been um away from this space for quite a quite a few months. Um, just I'm just shedding and dying. I've been dying since April. Like I thought like, oh, I was having an existential crisis for a couple of months. And I thought I'm coming back alive again. And then no, I was continuously dying. So um when you shared to the group that, oh, we're gonna talk about death and rebirth, I'm like, oh, perfect. Uh so yeah, I totally resonate with everything that was shared. Um and and especially the part about pain, the avoidance of pain, um, and how the rich people are actually afraid of dying. I totally resonate with all that. Um, how we're attached to um, what we have, how we're attached to ideas, spirituality, um, what is the meaning of love, how we are so attached to the meanings of words actually. um I was just in Bali, and I was in a yoga teacher training, and at the same time I was really not attached to the outcome of the yoga teacher training. Am I going to be a teacher? While he's always every day, the whole entire day, teach yoga. I'm like, what I gathered is yoga is just people trying to be crickets. What's the meaning of Christmas, and what's the meaning of gifts? And it's all part of Earth, and it's all the same. Everything is the same. And this death helped me realize that money is just a piece of dead leaf. It's just a paper that we painted on it, and then we just use it to exchange for something. And we put so much value and worth. And we call that self-worth, what we deserve. Oh, you deserve this amount of money. And I think this whole entire inner dance process, even though, like, let's just say, even though I'm not really there, but I'm there with you guys. I said I'm away from this inner dance, but I'm actually in my own process in inner dance itself already. On a daily life, I I'm not lying down and listening to the music, but I'm walking with the sounds around me, and I'm already inner dancing. Um, and yeah, I've received so much during this entire death process. Um, and I'm shedding so much of my spiritual beliefs. And it all started when I was in the mountains. I was like, oh shit, I think I'm going into something. Oh shit. I think I'm shedding a lot of beliefs from now on, ever since I was, yeah, in Maya. And it's just, oh my god, it's crazy. The depths that I'm going to, the depth, the black hole. Yeah, I'm basically there most of the time in the last few months. um, and I'm just observing how the world is attached to the practices that they are doing. Like, oh, this is making me feel better, that is making me feel better, but what is better? You're just being attached to yet another practice. So yeah, I was noticing myself, and I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be attached to what we call it inner dance. I'm not going to be attached to this name, this sound, this the word, the construct. Inner dance, the word is a construct, so we can have an idea of what it is. So yeah, like you say, even spirituality is just a word. This is just something that we can we can form a meaning around it. And even now when I'm talking, it's just sound. It's just the universe making sound. um there's not, maybe there's actually not much meaning around this. So um I feel like what you are teaching today, is a good way to convey what I have been feeling in the last few months. Yeah, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think I want to speak to this a little bit because it would be helpful for everyone in this room. Brendan speaking from Australia, and then a lot of you listening from the Americas, the US mostly. This is what this time zone is for, and then the other call is usually for Europeans. Having worked in Singapore for so long, bringing innerdance there, I read somewhere that the most millionaires in the world per capita are in Singapore. So in many ways, it's the most consumptive society. I would bring up Australia though, where you have such a big continent, and for people to live like a British lifestyle there or like a modern lifestyle, it really needed to modernize and conquer nature. Then bringing up the US and the Americas, North America, I think the richest countries would be synonymous with the richest people, where in the space, dealing with rich people, I had an uncle who just died, and he was maybe one of the richest people I know, definitely one of the most powerful people in the country. Rich people have more to lose, basically. So even if you're not holding rich people, when you're holding persons within a rich environment, rich in that sense, where people have access and something normalizes, the death denial function normalizes, so that the point would be about success and accumulation of resources and so on and so forth. Like the Philippines isn't a rich country, but when you go to Manila, the upper middle class is gaining steam, and it's one of the fastest rising economies in the world. So there is already something in the system. So when people lay down, it's going to be there. So when someone like Fiona, who is holding innerdance Singapore, speaks from like what is beyond the name innerdance, that is the real innerdance. Like having to process that in one's own body. In these types of situations, countries that I mentioned, there's instant gratification. As soon as the depression hits, you would open the refrigerator, you go out there, you buy something, and that's supposed to help. It's quite a big deal when you offer something to people to teach them to go inside. Okay, don't open the refrigerator just now. Don't buy anything. Don't try to gratify your need, because then that would hide the pain that's holding the AI in the pain, the authentic intelligence. Like what message is it trying to say? So a lot of people are trying to avoid that pain, which we would call darkness or judgment or whatever is being processed in the body. I think it means a lot because yeah, the societies I mentioned are designed to try to do away with this thing that you in fact are beginning to unravel. So there's a lot to be admired in many sessions that are happening in the world where the darkness is now being allowed to come out. So I'm receiving these feedbacks more and more from facilitators that the participants are experiencing more and more pain. And they're partially insecure. It's like, am I doing something wrong? Like, I'm creating discomfort, and quietly, I'm right there. It's like, yeah, good. And sometimes saying, okay, that's good. Then they get confused. Like, why would that be good? Am I not trying to alleviate pain? Am I not trying to create pleasure? I'm like, I'm not sure. Who told you that, like in the first place? Like when I first started to hold the work, there was so much darkness coming through bodies. And honestly, it felt amazing. It felt so good to allow all of this dark stuff to come out. It's like you could go to a Starbucks and people seem relaxed. You could go to a McDonald's, people seem calm, but underneath a lot of that, somehow the sensitive person feels there's something in the unspoken and in the unprocessed. What would liberate this so people can reach their naturality, their inner nature? Do you just take out your iPhone and start playing inner dance playlists? You know, there's something inside of us that desires the authentic, and yet this is disallowed. You know, does your boss allow that to happen? Does your, you know, does the government just facilitate that for you? That whole inner flow? Like, of course not. That's not how society kind of operates. So it could be very lonely, I feel, to do this work that would heal the space from the depths, like from the deep. And so thank you for like expressing, because you're actually helping your community by going through that, and to have that understanding, especially because Fiona was coming from the healing world. You know, she was in Reiki, and she was calling herself like a healer, and she was like training people to become healers. She's been going into this whole paradigmatic shift where, like, is anyone actually healing anyone and anything? And the more she's able to realize that people are, you know, already healed, like deep down, if they really just believed it, then the paradigm shift is so big. But because the culturality in Singapore is really healer based, it's this savior space. It's still a shame culture where, you know, families and systems, they're supposed to like the government is supposed to take care of the individual, and people aren't really empowered and enabled. So to, I think, really facilitate that in the most authentic way, you can't do that unless the transformation happens inside the body, and then slowly. And I think it doesn't take months, honestly. I think it could take years. I think we will be given beginner's luck, and then slowly you seesaw back and forth, and then you will get strong. But I do believe that there's a necessary drop, and what allows that drop to fully drop sometimes is community. That we're here to be like all one, but on the way to that, we need to be alone. Like, a lot of this authenticity needs to happen in solitude. Like, I had the island to do that in, and a lot of people don't have that luxury to have real solitude. So what you work on is energetic solitude. Like, have a clear boundary to hold your own space, so that even while you're dying happily. You're like joyfully, like, you know, there's a kind of pain that actually feels good, because it feels like something's happening, like something important is happening. It's not something you would always enjoy, but it feels right, because there is a kind of pain that even when you're feeling pressure, you feel like something's off. The kind of pain that I'm talking about that feels right is intuitive pain. It's like, it's necessary. It needs to happen, and you're not stopping it yet. You know, sometimes you come into contact with people, get worried. Let's just fix that problem. Like, no, this is not a problem. This is something that needs to be felt. It needs to be looked at. Don't give me a pill. Don't give me don't give me that antidepressant, like that pain medicine. Don't, not even the antipsychotic. Maybe I need to go into the black hole space to look at everything. So who could hold that? You know, so facilitators getting used to that kind of space. Then, because we've been there, I am listening to a lot of space holders who are therapists studying under us, who are sometimes going into psychosis, and they're like, "Oh my God, this is what they go through. I get it now. It's not a problem. It's multidimensionalities." And then when they come back, we are getting away from the problem-solving mindset. So yeah, I think we're avoiding the void, and I think it's the grand irony. So for Fiona to speak from Singapore, it's very potent, very poetic, almost. Beautiful. Thank you. All right. So anyone else would like to speak?
I would like to share. Hi, Pai. Hi, everyone.
Masha.
Hi. Um, I raised my hand because I wanted to say something else. But then you kept talking, Pai, and other things came up. So I am just going to articulate a few things that trying to. I I lost a friend. She passed away yesterday, and this relationship has been one of the most awakening relationships I've ever had in my adult life, especially because it made me realize that time doesn't exist. You know, I met her about a year ago, and suddenly we're trying to get together, and something happens, we can get together. She calls me about 5 months ago. I'm sorry, we're not able to make to coffee. I'm in the hospital, and I felt that almost I didn't have any choice. I wanted to be close to this person. I did not know why. I did not know, I had no motives, I had no agenda. So I got to experience the purest form of love with absolutely no agenda. And meeting this woman was such a gift because she went for she had cancer. So she had a very rare type of cancer, and she was never disclosing really which stage was it. She was just here. She wanted to live these moments that we shared together. And my last conversation with her was, she's expressing how her body was completely different from her spirit. She said, spiritually, I'm ready. I am in peace. I feel love. I am love, but my body hurts and I'm done with this pain. So it made me contemplate this complexity of us as humans, and time and friendships and love, and how this whole thing happened, and really didn't matter how long did I know this person. It was as if we had connected in this ancient wise space where we collide and time did not exist, and only the cultivation of that friendship or that love, only that. So when I found out she passed away, I saw her smiling, and I continued to see her free of pain, rising, smiling, and dance. And I think, wow, this is the inner dance, you know? So this is what I want to share. There's so many other things, but the conversation would be, a lot. And this is in my heart right now. It's right here in front of me. So it's yours. I'm sharing. Thank
Wow. And yeah, it feels like you're bracketing and conducting an epoche for us. That's really just going to the core of things. It's like, this is the point, this is the essence.
Mhm.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. And I can feel her gift with us today as well. Very touching.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else would like to share? Okay, so I think we'll call it a day. I was just told that I need to take my kids to school. The person who normally takes them to school isn't available, so I need to prepare a bit. So welcome to the Orange. Let's keep the conversations alive. For those who can make it to the next call, I think that would be kind of deep, built on whatever depth we had brought in today, philosophically, psychologically, and then I think we can go more into the energy space what is the structure of consciousness that reveals itself when people go into the void and the black hole, the hole with the W. So I think what Marsha shared is a really good way of closing. What is death anyway, and how do we build a relationship with it? When I work with people with cancer, I have this weird skewed understanding that cancer is actually the healing, and that could be literal, where the body is now showing that there's something that needs to be looked at. It's just that the diagnosis is often the judgment. When people get the word held in the space that there's something wrong with you, that's usually when it goes really not so good. But there are human beings that are able to hold the vibration of the thing. So I think an inner dance state would be to see the problem and realize that that's the solution. But there are people who actually see a good thing and still perceive that as a problem. And so when we perceive the problem as a solution, we don't solve the problem dissolves because there's something beyond the problem. And this is how we're experiencing this, that defines what is it, you know? So how are we perceiving? What is the paradigm that holds the intentionality of all things, the movement of all things? So thank you for being here. Thank you for your work, your passion, your love, your insights, and we'll see you again. So if you can unmute and help me to close. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good
Thanks,
night.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Very good.
Bye.
Thank
Have a
you.
great week.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.